So when the mayor and his team reached out to me about this job, it was really an exciting opportunity because, like many New Yorkers, I hadn't heard of the Mayor's Office for International Affairs, and I definitely didn't know about the Commissioner for International Affairs. New York City is host to the largest diplomatic corps in the world, and under Mayor de Blasio and myself, we have spent the last 3 years trying to figure out how to build a global platform from which we can best engage this diplomatic community. We have the United Nations headquarters, we have 193 permanent missions, we have UN affiliates like UNICEF based out here, but we also have the consular corps. We have 114 consulates who are important bridges and networks into our immigrant communities. So the leadership opportunity with this job was extraordinary. How do we create programs and opportunities to connect where we can bring value to the community that we're trying to serve, which is the diplomatic community, but also how do we get New Yorkers better engaged? How did they find value in this really exciting community that is uniquely based here in New York City? And so over the last couple of years, we have built a number of different programs. One is called Global Vision Urban Action. This has taken the Mayor's One NYC, which is our development agenda for New York City, and been able to compare it to the Sustainable Development Goals. That is what the global community has been focused on over the last couple of years, and we're able to share best practices. I think, from a leadership perspective, I also want to think about the way that New York City presents itself. We are as large, if not larger, than 110 countries, but we show up to these conversations around best practices because we need to have the humility. We are not just Manhattan. We have boroughs, and there are challenges throughout our 5 boroughs where we can learn from the Sao Paulos and the Nairobis of the world. So the leadership has been, how do I think entrepreneurially to create these programs and create these opportunities for engagement and collaboration? I also think building out an office, building out an agency and an organization, I was able to restructure in the first couple of months. And so this was creating new staff lines and new job descriptions and creating new focus areas and then building out that staff and supporting them. So leadership has shown up for me in this role really from being entrepreneurial. I work in government for the first time, and then really from a management perspective, and how do you actually create a truly collaborative and foster an entrepreneurial work environment. So that has been a really sort of exciting opportunity over the last 3 years. This political environment has really impacted the vision that the mayor and I have for this office. It is particularly important that New York City be engaging with the global community to show what our American values are, whether it's climate action, it is immigration, immigrant rights, universal pre-K, pre-kindergarten, early childhood education, affordable housing, parental leave. These are all issues that are important to everyone around the world, and we're leading on some of these issues here in New York City. So the vision for this office has really been to figure out how best can we build a collaborative relationship, whether it's with the UN or the other international delegations that are in New York City. But we have a very unique role as host city to be able to bridge those relationships and create opportunities for partnership. So we have a handful of ways that we do that. Again, one is called Global Vision Urban Action. The mayor takes very seriously what New York City's long-term equity and development agenda look like. We have that. It's called One NYC, that was launched back in 2015. And then in the same year, in 2015, the global community got together at the UN, and it's called the Sustainable Development Goals. But whether it's on education, access to healthcare, eradicating poverty, we have similar beliefs in how we choose to implement that. And so we do a number of best practice sharing and programs to highlight that piece. I also think part of the vision that's core to this office is we're creating this global platform, but how do everyday New Yorkers, how does our next generation benefit from that. We have a program called Junior Ambassadors where they learn about the Sustainable Development Goals, learn about it in the context of the UN and the global community, but then they come and they learn about it in their neighborhoods and they're asked to activate and do something in their community. And so in that way, we are really focused on building that next generation of global citizens. And I think, I think long-term vision for this office too is to ensure that we are bringing value to our taxpayers. And so I hope that in future administrations, whoever comes in sees that these different types of partnerships we have with our international delegations make sense to all New Yorkers. And so it's been exciting trying to implement and manifest that vision. So when I first found out about this job, I did not think I would be an entrepreneur commissioner. But the reality was that there was a lot of uncertainty and unknown going into this job. The reality is that the previous administrations ran this office in a particular way that really focused on the operational relationship that New York City has with the diplomatic corps. That is not what the mayor wanted me to do. He wanted me to create a global platform from which New York City can promote what is working here and better engage the global community within New York City. And that was a really interesting sort of thought exercise. And I came in, as I mentioned, I hadn't heard of this office before. Like many New Yorkers, I didn't realize that that New York City was a host to the largest diplomatic community in the world. And what I did for the first couple of months was get to know my constituents, right? I got to know other commissioners and people at City Hall and people at the UN and different consulate ambassadors and consuls general, and I listened to what they needed. What were the gaps? And I think, like every entrepreneur, it is about identifying what the gaps are and figuring out how to take advantage of that to bring opportunity to the community that you're trying to impact. And so my first couple of months was really that learning, gaining information, and then I had the opportunity to restructure. And it was very important for me to restructure this office in a way that would make sense within this administration, but also in the future. And so we currently have two sides of the house, which is very much focused on strategic partnerships, and the other is very much about how do we translate what's happening in New York City, our policies, into the global conversation and then amplifying it. And that process was really fascinating because I would never have thought coming into government I could be the entrepreneur that I have turned out to be. And we have a number of different programs. We have extraordinary relationships with our constituents, whether it's in the diplomatic corps or with our city agency partners, and that relationship has allowed us to to create things. And whenever I hire, I encourage every single person I hire to be an entrepreneur. What is your best idea? As you are learning about what your job description requires, what are the gaps? How can we fill it? Come, pitch me, sell me, get me excited about something, and then let's do it. And I happen to work for a mayor that has embraced that vision of an entrepreneurial mayor's office for international affairs, and we do what we do. We have the relationships and the reputation we do because we have been entrepreneurial over the last couple of years. Cultural diversity. That is part of the reason I joined this administration. So to start off, this is an administration that values cultural diversity. We proactively seek it and celebrate it. And so in coming into this role, when I thought about cultural diversity, I was like, this is the community to work with. We have 193 member states at the UN. We have the UN community. We have the 114 consulates. And these are communities that represent cultures and languages that represent the entire world. And so it was very interesting to figure out how best do we take advantage of the fact that we host this extraordinary global community, and how do we take advantage of unlikely partnerships? How do we bring people together that might not have ever thought to work together into the same room to talk about the issues we care about? And so having a focus on issue-based convenings and collaborations has been very important, but for example, we worked with the Korean consulate to get the Korean community out into the Queen's Library. The Queen's Library was a really important partner. And with our Department of Education and the First Lady's office, it was all about how do you read, talk, and sing to your baby. It doesn't matter what language you do it in. But it was an interesting connection between the city, the Queen's Library, and a foreign entity, the Korean consulate. We also do that with junior ambassadors. Who would have thought the UN and the Department of Education should be working closely together? But that is actually one of our core values of this office, is how are we bringing the city and our different global community partners together in conversation. And while we can't work, while people can't work on everything together, if you focus on the on an issue or a moment in time, there are opportunities to get people to talk about things. That otherwise, unlikely things that otherwise we might not have had the opportunity. So the cultural diversity is without question one of the reasons I'm here. At times it can be a challenge, but the most important thing is looking for those opportunities, and that's where being an entrepreneur is particularly important. So now is the time to activate. If you're not angry, something is wrong. And so activation, it can happen in so many ways. Listen, you can give money, you can volunteer time, you can sit on boards and fundraise. I mean, things like development, not sexy, but very important. Picking up the phone call, pitching an organization's work, that kind of fundraising is key at community organizational level. So you can always do internships and volunteer times. There's hundreds of incredible government programs, city programs that you can do, but I really think looking at community organizations that are working in the neighborhoods, working with specific communities, whether it is children, youth, domestic violence survivors, look at that. And I will say personally, my focus in my entire career has always been women's rights, women's empowerment. And one piece of advice I have for you, it's what I call my cheat sheet vet. I look at community organizations and look at the community foundations and look at the organizations that they're funding. So if you happen to be in New York City and you care about girls and women's issues, check out the New York Women's Foundation. Look at who they're giving money to, and that'll help you start to get aware of the organizations that are doing really good work, that are getting funded from a very reliable institution. Now, if you care about international girls and women's issues, check out Mama Cash, check out the Global Fund for Women. Look at who their grantees are. But those are ways in which you can get activated. I think giving money, even if it's $5, matters, right? It shows that these organizations, that you know who they are and you're paying attention and you're supporting their work. But there are so many ways you can lead workshops at youth organizations. Just figure out creatively how much time you want to spend, how much of yourself you want to give, and then figure out, look at the range of options that you have. But now is the time to activate like never before. So I am most proud when I reflect on my career over the last couple of years. I've been able to take really extraordinary platforms, right? First it was the Clinton Global Initiative, now it's New York City, and create value out of what I am charged with. So at the Clinton Global Initiative, I was hired to create the Girls and Women's Program, and what an extraordinary brand within which to do it. And I was able to work with world leaders, with corporations, philanthropists, nonprofits, to help them figure out how can they better integrate gender into how they were trying to address global challenges, whether it was in health or economic empowerment. And when I look back, and I also come to this job, it's been that entrepreneurial mindset to figure out how to bring value. And so that was something I was able to make the Girls and Women's Program at the Clinton Global Initiative one of its most successful programs. And the way that we're able to, or they at that time were able to account for that success was by how many members, whether they were in government or they were corporations, were incorporating gender issues into their commitments, into what they were doing to address global challenges. So there was like a tangible from here to there on girls and women over the time that I was there. And now when I look at this office that I get to run, this agency I get to run, a couple of weeks ago, I spoke with the Secretary General. It was Nelson Mandela Day, and we partnered, my incredible team partnered with Randall's Island to bring UN staff to do a day of service. That's what Nelson Mandela's birthday means every year, is let's focus on service. That's what he cared about. And I was able to speak with the Secretary General in front of all of the UN ambassadors about the role of New York City. And to me, that really highlights the value that the UN now sees in working with our office and in partnering with me and my team. And so it has been an extraordinary career of just being able to take these pretty incredible brands and build something around them, build something that has truly brought value, whether it was in integrating girls and women into these commitments to action that Clinton Global Initiative members did, and now really to figure out how we partner to really showcase New York City's American values, again, around climate change, immigrant rights, whatever the topic is. We are really trying to figure out ways where we can exchange best practices and share what New York City is doing. So I've been very, I have to say, proud of myself for having spent the last decade or so really bringing value to the things that I've focused on. So when I was first hired at the Clinton Global Initiative, they wanted me to focus on girls and women and build a program. And what was really one of the things that stood out to me really quickly was that anytime a member came in and said girls and women, they were sent to me. And over the first 2 years, I spent a lot of time ensuring that we had a membership that cared about girls and women, but it really didn't make any sense if somebody came and cared about girls' education or women's economic empowerment or women's health, that they all came to me. We were all talking amongst each other. What we needed to do were be in the health conversations, education conversations, and what does that integration look like? It took me 6 years, and I will say one of the challenges when people feel like somebody owns something, right? So girls and women was Penny's thing, when really it needed to be everybody's thing. And that was an incredible growing opportunity for me, because I had to learn how to bring not only the members and get them excited about girls and women, but my colleagues, people that worked in press and communications or in the membership department. People had to see the intrinsic value of focusing on girls and women's issues throughout the entire organization. And I will say one of the very exciting things that happened before I left at the Clinton Global Initiative was that the CEO restructured and brought me in as Director of Girls and Women's Integration. And what that meant was that if members were coming in around girls and women's issues, they were going to the people that were related to those issues. So girls' education went to education, women in climate change went to climate change. And my role was to ensure that everybody, whether they were in press and communications or in programs, were aware of all the opportunities around girls and women. So it was, I think when overcoming the obstacle of people sort of just siloing girls and women was continuing to be passionate, but remembering to be passionate to the people that I was interacting with every day, not just the members, not just the clients, but how are you getting people excited about the work that you're doing? How are you being diplomatic? How are you getting people to feel like they want to buy into what you're excited about? That is a lot of hard work. That is a lot of relationship building, but at the end of the day, it was extraordinarily worth it. And I have to say, sort of curating that skill set from that period at CGI around how to overcome the obstacles of getting folks excited about girls and women has turned out to be very valuable for me here now as commissioner, because I also have to, get different city agency partners excited about a particular UN event around sustainable development goals or an exciting opportunity to learn from another city in another country, and how are we how we're constantly bringing value to the work of our partners. And so that skill set has been very valuable to me over the last couple of years. I get asked this question pretty often, and especially when I was at the Clinton Global Initiative and I was working on domestic and international women's issues and seeing sort of the leading thinkers and thought leaders on interacting with them on a daily basis. My primary takeaway is that there is not one silver bullet. It is not women's economic empowerment. It's not just girls' education. It's not just safety. We need all of that. And so at the core, we need to figure out systemic change. And this is something in the US in particular, in New York City, that this administration is trying to address. I will say something like parental leave. That is, the mayor signed that in for New York City employees back in January 2016. But something like parental leave allowed me, I'm a new mom, to be able to stay at home for 2 months without being worried about whether I'm getting paid or not. These are the kinds of systemic things, whether it's we talk about universal pre-K, but guess what? Having your child be able to go to school for free at that age frees up a lot of the worry and concern that, young families or families have, but in particular single moms. And so these are systemic things that we need to figure out both globally and domestically. Listen, safety, reproductive rights, all of these issues are core. And if you're trying to figure out what to get involved in, you need to think about what personally impacts you. Where do you feel a lot of passion? I worked in domestic violence quite a lot. I've been very committed to that because I'm a survivor of domestic violence. And that's the way I think if you're trying to figure out how best to get involved, do it where there is a personal connection to you. But I think when you think about the issues related to girls and women, you have to think about it systemically, right? If you do one thing, you're almost putting a Band-Aid on it. You've got to figure out where are the policies at the government level, how are we changing cultures and attitudes and the way that people think about girls and women. I think an empowered life for women and girls, it's going to take a variety of forms, but at the end of the day, it's going to be their ability to make educated choices for themselves, whether it is about their body, their career, their movements, and that to me is coupled really with the systemic change that needs to happen. That needs to happen at the public policy level, that needs to happen within families, within communities and neighborhoods. And so we need both girls and women to know that their rights. That's the reason I say be educated, have access to great education. But we also need a community, a neighborhood, families, governments that support that. And that is where we are going to see around the world empowered girls and women, is when both of those things happen. You can't do one without the other. You need that systemic change. Really, it's about being yourself. And I think one of the hangups that I had when I was younger, which I did not need to have, is I really wanted to focus on having a very linear path for the future. I needed to know what the next thing was. It had to make a lot of sense. And really, you don't. Looking back at my career and choices I've made, what I have been true to have been the things that I care about, and that's largely been women's rights, and that's followed me my entire career. But my narrative was built. I have done some fundraising, I've done some public policy, I've done program development, and so there was a real story to tell that I didn't need to be that stressed out. But I think I wish I would have been a lot easier on myself. I think I spent too much time stressed out, which was unnecessary.